Well, I'll be damned. They actually did it. This is pretty much all the confirmation we need. Hot off the heels of Florentino Perez calling for an election that we all have to assume he knows he's going to win, which really tells you all you really need to know about the governance at this club, because 2 days after the announcement of this election, Perez was seen fighting with Madrid supporters during a 2-0 win at the Bernabeu. Real Madrid fans had posters saying Florentino guilty ripped away from them. Kylian Mbappe was whistled by those same supporters and then went out to a press conference afterwards to say that he didn't know why he was fourth choice in the assessment of his then manager. Again, all of this happened in one match. But it won't be an issue anymore. Arbeloa is gone and can finally live a calm, blameless life. Looking to the future though, Netflix, Amazon Prime, Hulu, Apple TV, HBO Max, Tubi, goddamn Crunchyroll. We need cameras in this dressing room. I guarantee you won't regret it. The world needs this. Hello everyone, hope you're doing well. Welcome back. What a time to be alive. It is official. As a neutral, things couldn't be poised any better. This whole thing either ends in unadulterated glory or total collapse and internal combustion. Who am I kidding? It's far more likely that it will be both. In that exact order. Now, on the intro and the craziness that set all of this up, Florentino Perez has, for a very long time, been the undisputed king of Real Madrid. This is nothing new. I made a deep dive on his Madrid kingdom almost 2 years ago, and evidently, nothing is changing anytime soon. On Mourinho, though, it seems like he's just crawling his way back up the ladder. When he was at Fenerbahce, he got knocked out of the Champions League by Benfica. A couple weeks later, he's Benfica's manager. He then gets knocked out of the Champions League by Real Madrid. A couple months later, he now works for Real Madrid. Can't beat them, join them. Seeing as we've already gone into detail on the problems that Real Madrid had over the previous season in a previous video, I want to spend this one kind of doing a bit of a catch-up on Jose Mourinho over the last 2 years or so to kind of, make the case of whether this was a good move or not. Maybe we can come back to this video in a year or so and assess. At Benfica, in the 25-26 season, Jose Mourinho achieved something extraordinarily rare, an invincible season. However, he also achieved something that I would say is even more unlikely, a third-placed finish after an invincible year. In the 21st century, only 2 other European teams have managed to go undefeated and still miss out on the title. Serbia's Red Star Belgrade in 2008 and Moldova's Sheriff FC in 2025. But both of those teams finished in second. Third and undefeated is just crazy work. When Mourinho took over at Benfica last September, he inherited a squad that had already spent 100 million euros plus and hadn't won the league since 2023, which is a long time for Benfica. Excitement was high, but cautious, however. By the end of it, it seemed that the caution was justified, as most Benfica supporters were just happy that the season was over. In the words of Carlos Pereira Fernandes, sports editor of Portuguese media outlet Notícias ao Minuto, quote, Jose Mourinho's return timidly filled a balloon that had been deflating, but, truth be told, amidst the pomp and circumstance, it amounted to nothing, with eliminations on all fronts and not even Champions League qualification to cushion the fall. Now, I use that quote because it really does seem like it's a common sentiment. Mourinho, he has a habit of being part of a toxic ship, but historically, it takes a bit more time than this for the toxicity to fester. It seems that this was a real speedrun type of situation, similar to how his Fenerbahce stint also seemed to be a bit of a speedrun, also lasting 1 year. The European highlight for Benfica this year was a 4-2 win over Real Madrid that helped secure their entry into the knockout playoff stage. And then, because the football gods have a truly strange sense of humor, it was defeat against Real Madrid in the playoff stage that sent them out of the competition. A first leg, if we all remember, was embroiled in a lot of alleged racism and much more. Gianluca Prestiani was suspended as a result of it, and then on a wider lens, Mourinho, as he always is, was at the center of it, getting sent off himself on the night, and then later coming under fire for claiming that Vinicius Jr. shouldn't have celebrated a goal the way that he did, which is what led to the alleged racism from Prestiani. He then went as far as saying that UEFA and the refs were colluding with Real Madrid. I was sent off for saying something very obvious. The referee had a piece of paper that said Tchouaméni, Carreras, and Huijsen can't receive a yellow card. I told the referee, because I've spent 1,400 games on the bench, he knew perfectly who he could book and who he couldn't. We know how things work. He didn't win any PR points with these comments, and I know what some of you may be thinking. The guy who 15 years ago claimed UEFA was plotting against Madrid is now complaining about what he fought so hard for. And now we have come full circle. Anyway, by the time Benfica were knocked out of the Champions League, there was already a sense that their season was over. Porto was already 7 points ahead and would not let up. Benfica had been knocked out of every cup competition too. By April 2026, it looked like he had already turned on his squad. He aired out his grievances in the public eye after a 1-1 draw to Casa Pia. When speaking about his players, he said, quote, "I tried to make them understand because there are some who seem to not understand football and forget the realities." Then again, perhaps he had already turned on them some time before this. There was the episode where he openly called his players inferior when compared to the eventual champions Porto as early as October 2025 after a 0-0 draw to them. Quote, "Porto has players with a lot of horsepower, with the ability to attack space. We don't have that type of player. Right now the team is suffering from low confidence. I found 3, 4, 5 players with a self-esteem crisis." No fans were pleased with the conduct or the words of the man formerly known as the Special One. Him and President Rui Costa became the face of everything that the supporters disliked about their team. At the end of the day, it seems like one of the most blaring reasons for the disdain just came down to how the team looked on the pitch. When it comes to Mourinho, the playbook is more or less the same, and it has been for many, many years. It's still one that favors structure, pragmatism, transitions. He doesn't care about beautiful football, triangles, champagne football. It's just about low blocks, mid blocks, and making life as difficult as possible for the opposition, trying to stop them a lot of times instead of trying to play the game. He isn't afraid to let things get ugly. Looking at how all this has played out, it is a tad strange to see that this is the direction Madrid have eventually decided to go in. But perhaps ugly is what Madrid really need. They need defensive solidity. Mourinho is an expert. They need control of the midfield, or at least the means and mentality to disrupt teams that are used to having that. Another Mourinho speciality. They need someone to rein in big personalities. Very few managers have worked with as many superstars as him, and of the ones that have, there are maybe like a very small handful, like 3 to 5 max, that have had more success than him. Although let's not get carried away here. Madrid don't need a babysitter, they need someone who's going to come in and win immediately. That being said, when was the last time Mourinho won a league title against truly elite opposition? His last league title was Chelsea, 2014-15, 11 years ago. What's changed? Quote, "I don't think he's lost his qualities. I think now football is very different. The players have changed and they have more power. The players changed how they act, and Mourinho now has to accept that that's the way it is." That was a quote from Ricardo Carvalho, former Mourinho player at Porto, Chelsea, and Real Madrid. It highlights the main fear that I think most Madrid fans have when it comes to this appointment. This quote from Carvalho is 6 years old. In fact, he said it in 2020 when Mourinho was in charge of Tottenham Hotspur. Quite frankly, the sentiment from Carvalho is a sentiment that was strong long before he entered Spurs. In that last stint with Chelsea, a common belief is that it would not have been possible if Chelsea didn't have the old guard from Mourinho's first stint still there. Petr Cech, Branislav Ivanovic, John Terry, John Obi Mikel, Didier Drogba. But with a mix of new as well, that job was not free of its own drama, including not only players but also support staff. Eva Carneiro, Chelsea's former physio, has a multi-million-pound settlement that proves as much. At almost every job since leaving Inter Milan in 2010, the main story around his eventual exit revolves around falling out with the players, the board, or just some kind of bust-up. Real Madrid? Everyone. Manchester United, Paul Pogba, Henrik Mkhitaryan, Luke Shaw, Tottenham Hotspur, Dele Alli, Danny Rose, Davinson Sanchez, Roma, Rick Karsdorp, and kind of his entire bench. There have been more, there have been less, more severe, less severe, you get the idea, but the underlying problem for all of them, it's really been the same. Now, I know that this episode has already been quite, quote heavy, I'm sorry about that, but what we can all agree on is that he's still on top of his game when it comes to that aspect at the very least. But I do have one more quote that I think, it does a good job of painting the sort of narrative I'm trying to put forth here. It's from after a cup match back in November. His Benfica side struggled to a 2-0 win over third division side Atletico. The first half was so bad that at halftime I told the players I was going to change 4. I wasn't going to change 5 because I couldn't play 45 minutes without a substitution up my sleeve, but I would have liked to change 9. Now, of course, another thing worth noting is that while he's been famously harsh in many of these previous cases and bust-ups, he's also been proven to be correct in his assessment of a lot of these players and profiles that he's dealt with. But there's the problem, does being correct even matter where he's going? Xabi Alonso was correct in his assessment of the team he inherited at Madrid. Who's to say things will go any better for Jose Mourinho at Madrid? Yeah, he is a veteran, he's a legend, he deserves respect, but will he get it? Do you think that this even matters to these players? Especially when players with a fraction of the player power that Madrid players have at much weaker clubs have chosen not to follow his orders the way he wants them to. In some leaked audio from a couple of years ago, Florentino Perez was heard claiming that Mourinho was not normal and had a large ego. But in the public eye, it seems that they've both worked quite hard to make it seem as though they have no problems and never had problems. Mourinho, as recently as last year, claimed that Florentino Perez begged him to not leave Madrid and that he had already done the hard part of building the team. Whether Mourinho was telling the truth here and the story actually happened doesn't really matter to this discussion, because there is merit to the claim. Even if it was a lie, the year after he left, Madrid won La Decima. You tell me in the comments whether you believe that this was because Mourinho left, because of how he built the squad, or perhaps both. When Mourinho joined Benfica, he even claimed that Perez sent him a personal message congratulating him of joining, quote, a club of his caliber. When you frame everything like this over the video, it seems like Mourinho's return to Madrid was written in the stars. His tactics are still clearly relevant. I think what everyone refers to as negative football, haram ball, whatever you want to call it, it's always going to be effective if you just aim to nullify the opposition, kind of first and foremost, with incredible players that are always going to be able to get you over the line. It always works. Arteta has just won the Premier League in big old 2026 using that tactic and mentality for a lot of the games that they played. All I'm saying is don't write off this appointment just yet. Instead, get out the popcorn, get yourself a seat, and just enjoy. And there we have it. The 2 videos I spoke about earlier on, the one on Florentino Perez and the one on Real Madrid, should be over here on screen right now, I think. So check those out. That's all for me today. Hope you guys enjoyed. Hope you're having a great day. Cheers, and I will catch you in the next one.